Welcome back to the shop. This week I wanted to talk about my new weld table. This is the CertiFab Pro table from weldtables.com. There are already a lot of reviews on how to set this thing up, so I'm not going to cover that here, primarily because I think a lot of people do a better job and I am a very amateur welder, so I will not claim that mine came out perfectly flat and level. Which is probably one of the first things to talk about because all of the advertisements state that this table is a table that you can get very precise, and I'm confident that you probably can. However, if you make even the smallest mistake like I did while setting it up, it won't turn out as level as it can be. So I'll cover a few of those mistakes real quickly just so that hopefully if you're doing this and you want to try and avoid them, you can learn from my mishaps. The videos out there that I watched, they basically all said that you put the table upside down, you use U-bolts, you clamp it, and I did exactly that. I'll put a picture up of the first clamp setup. That is actually not the one that I wound up using. After I had that clamp set up, I decided it still wasn't enough to stabilize the table for welding, so I went to Harbor Freight and I bought 10 of these clamps because I had watched another video and I knew that I could reuse them as table clamps, which we'll cover a little bit later on after the table was set up. So I bought 10 of these, and after I bought 10 of these, I went around every single joint around the outside, clamped everything, I shined a flashlight all underneath there, I made sure that there was no light, trying to get this as level as I could possibly get it. Where I made my mistake, and I think I want to help others to hopefully avoid this, is I did buy U-bolts, but the U-bolts that I bought, I simply used the plate that came with the U-bolt, and honestly that plate just isn't strong enough to put enough downward pressure on the cross members to the table surface to really cinch it down. And that cinching motion is really what makes this table flat if you assemble it correctly. So I did end up with a slight bow in the center of the table. It's pretty good in the length direction in terms of being smooth and flat. In this direction here, it is off. There's a rise in this middle, which again, I'm confident that if I would have used some flat stock and drilled holes in it, which is what they recommended in the other videos, I just assumed that there would be enough pressure again with the straps that came with the U-bolts. That's not the case. In fact, one video that I watched mentioned that as you're tightening down, you can hear the creaking, and once you hear the creaking stop, that's how you know you're good. In my case, I could never get that much tension on it, again, because the thin straps that come with U-bolts just aren't thick enough to hold that kind of pressure. So ultimately, apparently what happened is that left a little bit of a gap, which is probably what's creating this rise in the middle. I might go ahead and pick up another one of these. I do like it, and see if I can't get that one even more precise. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and cover this one, and I'm going to talk to you guys about it. One of the key features to this table is these holes that are spaced perfectly throughout the entire table. The measurements are on their website, and it's a standard pattern. What that does for you is it allows you to do a bunch of different things. So one, it allows you to use clamps. Two, it allows you, if you make something perfectly square, then you can use that to frame up other pieces. This is probably one of the most critical aspects that I found about this table because it really does help you to set things up. The other big option that offers you is the ability to use bolts and create fencing basically anywhere you might need it on the table. Essentially, if you just put the bolts in there, and if you really want to be precise, you can put a nut on the bottom side and really tighten these up so that they don't move at all. From my experience so far, I found that if you just drop them in, once you start clamping things, they tend to stay perfectly put anyway. So what I do is I just make sure that the flat side of the nut is up against the piece that I'm working on. I put it down on the table, and then I grab one of my clamps here and drop it down in there. And once you cinch that up, it's not going anywhere. And again, this is basically a fencing. So, you know, if you take a hammer, once you've got it cinched down, you tap it all the way up against these bolts, you're going to get a nice level surface all the way down the table. The previous tables that I had, they did have fencing and it was on the outside. I really liked that option of being able to butt pieces up against there and keep them straight while you're welding. However, they were only along the edges. Again, That's one of the many options that you get with these holes drilled throughout the surface of the table. So extremely great idea and concept. The other thing that it offers is, you can see here, I've kind of fabbed up, I made sure that this piece here that's mounted was square, and then I drilled some holes and I spaced them with the holes on the table, put some 5/16 bolts through there, and then welded them to the piece, which basically makes a square for me to make sure that I can clamp pieces in an upright position. Now, the company that makes the table, they do offer squares. I'm sure that those are probably even more precise, but this is some scrap pieces that I had laying around, and again, I'm practicing welding, so it seemed like a good opportunity. I did check it afterwards, and I'm pretty happy with how square this came out. So now I can use that for other pieces. So these clamps are one of the greatest things. However, if you look at the professional companies that make these clamps, they are somewhere, I think, around $70 a piece. And I saw another video that had this idea here of using these Harbor Freight clamps that you can get for about $3 a piece. And then again, just a 5/16 bolt. You take the end off with the rivet and you cut it at a slight angle, and you weld the bolt to the bottom. Basically what that does is, when it goes into a slot, then it binds itself as you're clamping down, and so that basically allows you to clamp items without any bolt on the bottom side. So that really worked out extremely well. The other thing that I really like about it is it allows you to keep all of your clamps on the table along this row here. Easy access, you can move them out of your way quickly and easily. Nothing's bolted down, you just drop them in the holes. So these are probably one of the key features that I really liked about the table, and I wanted a lot of these clamps to be able to secure things while welding them, hopefully keep them from bowing as you apply the heat. So once I saw that option to make these clamps, because again, I was not going to spend $700 in terms of clamps. I am a hobbyist, and so that kind of money just was not really worth it to me. Now, obviously, these may not last as long, and I'm sure there is a quality difference in those $70 clamps. But if you're a do-it-yourselfer and you're at home, I think these work really well, and they're a very cheap option. While you're at it, I would recommend picking up a whole bunch of 5/16 bolts. Again, because they make fencing, you can do pieces in both directions, so you can make corners that way. So pick up a bunch of those, because as you do, you can drop those in the table anywhere, and like I said, you can push this piece tight up against here, then you can turn around, drop a clamp in, and cinch it down, and basically you're going to end up with a nice square corner. So this piece here is wanting to rise up on the other side, so I'll just grab another clamp and then draw it down. You'll notice there it didn't want to clamp, so that's one key thing to note, is make sure you loosen your clamps all the way up, because you need all that threaded room to basically put enough angle on the clamp to cause it to bind and subsequently put downward pressure on the piece. So just make sure that you unthread those before you drop your clamp down. Other than that, I'm extremely pleased with the table, and I would definitely recommend it. Again, I think the big thing is, in terms of its flatness and its squareness, that really just comes down to assembly. I am highly confident with the laser cut components that this table can come out very, very well. However, like my mistakes, it is very easy to make small mistakes and wind up with not a perfectly level surface. Again, I think probably what I'm going to do in time is pick up another one and give it another go. Use that flat stock, which is much stiffer, to see if I can get enough pressure on there, and I'll probably just use bolts instead of U-bolts, so that way I could even use like a 5/16 bolt and really, really clamp it down good, because this is, I believe, 3/8 steel on the top. So it takes a significant amount of pressure to really draw that plate up against those cross members. But again, I am confident that it will come out straight and level if you take your time and you do it perfectly right. Welding it up was really easy. Again, you got to spread the heat out, but they have these little recessed areas, so it's relatively easy to get your weld bead down in there and not have a whole lot of flap wheel work to do once the table is done. You can kind of see by the shiny nature of this one, I have hit it with a flap wheel. That's actually more to do with the splatter that I've been getting so far. I don't have any of the spray to help with it. I got to pick some of that up. And again, I am a very novice welder, so I'm probably getting more splatter than I should. Hopefully with time that will get better. So far I've just been playing around with various pieces and, you know, again, practicing welding. Total novice, total newbie. I'm watching videos online and going from there. That's how I'm learning. Some things are turning out okay, some things aren't. If you follow us on Instagram, you'll see some of the pictures that we've posted so far with the weld beads that we've laid down. Again, some of them I'm happy with, some of them not so much. Then the last thing that I want to cover, which is probably a little bit unique to my table, is how I mounted it in terms of a stand. The weldtables.com does offer a leg kit for this. I had already bought one of these miter saw stands from Harbor Freight for a cutting table that I have, and I'll show that in another video. But essentially, I really like these tables. I think for the money, they make a really good option. And one of the things that I really liked about it is that it has the wheels down here on the corner. So I thought that would be ideal. In any shop, obviously floor space is a premium. So my original thought was, let me put the table on here, I'll tack it down to the pipes, and then I'll be able to flip it upright and roll it out of the way when I'm not using it. And although that concept sounded really good, I got everything done. I tried to flip it up, and this wheel here immediately just bent under the weight. Those wheels are not intended to hold the weight of this table. Now I still might try and solve that problem, because I might try to take a piece of square tube or some kind of a setup to put a heavier duty axle and some heavier duty wheels on that end, because I still would really like to flip this thing upright and roll it out of the way to keep shop space open when it's not in use. Now, having said that, since I've got the table set up, and because these clamps do stay nice and organized at the edge of the table here, I don't know that I'm going to be moving it out of the way. So if I had it to do over again in terms of mounting the table to this stand, I think probably what I would have done is, instead of mounting the table to the round bars, which makes it very difficult because you are welding a flat surface to a round surface, so your welds have to be very precise, I would have taken the table and I would have put it onto these platform pieces. That would have been a flat surface against a flat surface, so it would have been easier to weld. The second thing that would have offered is the option, assuming these handles didn't melt under the heat, to be able to detach the tabletop from the stand. So if you wanted to separate the two, that would be a nice option. And then the third thing that it would do is, when I was talking about supporting those pieces, it would raise this table up so that that way these extensions would be below the surface of the table. If you look right now, they're a little above. So if I want to use that, basically what I'm going to have to do is cut the roller off, put a piece of flat stock across there or something like that, so that this piece is lower than the table surface. It does have an adjustment on the end here so that you can raise it up or down. So as long as it's below the table surface, you'd be able to adjust it to the right height to support those longer pieces without causing it to teeter on the table surface itself. So again, the reason why I did it that way was to try and keep the tabletop as low as possible to the stand, for the purposes of trying to prevent it from tipping over if I was going to flip it upright and collapse the legs. Again, I think this table might just be too much weight to be able to do that with this stand, but I might try a few more things to see if I can get it to work, because again, having it, the ability to tip it up and roll it around and move it out of the way, would be a really nice option. So that's pretty much it for this CertiFab Pro table. Again, overall, I'm extremely happy with it. I'm really pleased. I think for the money, I believe this is around $250 shipped. I don't think you can get a better table for the money. And I think, again, if you use flat stock with your U-bolts or bolts instead of just the U-bolts with the steel plates that come with them, and cinch it down really, really well, and again, take your time welding all the spots, I think you can get an extremely smooth, level surface for not a whole lot of money. So if I do try another one, I'll be sure to post that video as well. Hopefully some of you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, be sure to go ahead and click that subscribe button so you can stay tuned for all of our future videos. We're going to have more fabrication tools and projects coming up. We're also going to be covering an update on the 2.8 liter Chevy Duramax. We still have the Focus RS reviews to do, and there might be some mods coming there or another project car. Wait and see. So until next time, take care, and in this case, fabricate safe.